I've never met anyone like her. And I guess I could tell you hours of stories about her. I can't think of any though.
Remember how she'd sleep with her feet up against the side of the wall?
Huh, I don't remember that.
Lay down on the Tom Molesworth couch,
Mm-hmm.
put her feet up on the back of the couch or up on the wall.
Oh yeah. She, I remember when she died, you know, and where we all met there. Remember in Billings and drove down and stood around and sang to her. That was a real tearjerker. Incredible character. She had, well, you know, gave great readings, and when she gave enemas, did anyone ever tell them about enemas? I'm sure they did. She told a story about Betty and Bettina, about this girl that rode on the train that left her doll named Bettina on the train. And it was a boy who bawled. And we never knew whether we bawled because of the story or because we were getting an enema. But she was a great believer in enemas. So we heard that story a lot, I'll tell you. But a great, great human being. And I've often wondered how they ever got together, you know. Dad, here he was, a great big sort of a two-fisted character, and yet he was the bishop or branch president of the Cody Ward for almost 20 years, you know. And great character, I'll tell you. I guess I've run out of stories.
Let's talk about Charles W. for a little bit. What do you remember about your really early experiences? Of course, you were born in Cali, but you don't remember anything about Cali.
No, I don't remember a thing about it.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember going to a basketball game with Ruth and Mary Louise when they had to babysit me, and they'd wrap me into a quilt. And they'd carry me out to the car and going to the old Cody Gymnasium, and they put me up on that wire thing. You go down to the dressing rooms, you know, and they had a sort of they put me up on there, or they'd hold me in their arms. That's about as young as I can remember being in Cody. And I can remember, then I can remember, by the way, sleeping in the middle room with my 4 sisters, you know. And then I got to have to go to share a room with Hink. Oh, it's awful. I remember I went to a movie called The Man Who Never Hung, or Hanged. And they hung him, then they hooked him up to this thing with the beakers and stuff, flashing fluid back for, brought him back to life. So he killed all the guys that the jury, with a needle in the phone. They put the phone up. At that moment on, I never really liked horror movies because I would lie in that army cot that we'd sleep on with the sheets over that, scare me to death, you know. But I can remember as a young, I could talk to you for hours. Hink, I must tell you the story about Hink. He beat me. He threw clods of dirt. He hit me in the eye. He had me hold in my right hand, which is no longer here, soldiers, and he'd take a .22 rifle and shoot it out from between my fingers. Can you imagine you doing that? I can't.
Can you imagine you doing that?
I know that. And then I can remember it splattered and hit my finger, and I went like that and caught it on the barbed wire and cut it up. Once I was up on the Ruth, what they call that building in the back, that where Ruth sort of decorated.
It was a chicken coop in the beginning.
Yeah, I was up on the roof and Hink threw a clod of dirt and hit me in the eye. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Yes, you do. And I remember running to go back in the house, him grabbing me and holding me. I mean, my eye is all swollen up like this. I couldn't even see out, and him slowed me down before I could go in the house and tell on him. But
How did you come to like to read so much?
I think everyone reads in the family. You know, I think I don't know. I think everyone. I guess because everybody else read in the family. There's always magazines around, and everyone. There were a lot of good books around, and
How did you happen to go to Cranbrook?
because I was dumb. And one after blew my hand off. I had my eardrum blown out. Do you remember that? And there was a doctor there. I believe his name was Dr. Bruce Proctor, or if that he was there, or he was a doctor in Omaha. I can't remember which one. And he took a piece of stainless steel and pulled it out when it's hot, and when it broke off, it was just like a thinner than a needle. And he'd reach in an acid bottle and put that acid in there. And he'd reach in on my tattered eardrum and hit the edges and burn it. It felt like smoke coming out of there. It really hurt. But you just, nothing you could do but just stand it. And so he did that, and then 6 weeks later, by that time, it would sort of heal in. Then you'd come back and you'd do it again. Well, they didn't have anywhere to put it for 6 weeks. So they put me in Cranbrook because Pete Simpson had gone there, Al Simpson had gone there, and Jim Nielsen had gone there after high school. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know anything when I went there. And it was unbelievable. It was like going to a golf course, you know. I went there for a year. And it was fun for me. And I don't know how they put up with me, but that's how I went to Cranbrook.
And after Cranbrook?
I went to Wyoming for a year. And then at the end, I had a wonderful, glorious time in Wyoming.
Where did you stay?
I stayed with Mrs. Bain down in her basement with a blind guy named Tony Cassio. This blinder, he could see with one eye, had terrible cataracts. He could tell light from dark. That was the only thing he could tell. And I would read to him. And you could read in a monotone. You could sing song. You could do anything. And he could just follow you. That's, you know. And so he was a very, very devout Catholic. And so he asked me to read to him from the Catholic Bible. And I read to him from the Pearl of Great Price. And I'd say to him, come on, Cassio, you don't believe all this stuff. You know, I'd read him a chapter a night. He'd lay on the bed, looking. I can remember, by the way, I was awful mean to him. I'd put pans of water around his bed. And he'd get up in the morning, step in his water. And or he'd leave he'd be in there reading with Braille, and I'd turn on the lights, and I'd say, Cassio, whenever you turn on the lights, you want to ruin your eyes? You know, things like that. But anyway, I'd sit on, he had a brass bed. I'd sit on the edge, and he'd lie before me, and I'd read from the Pearl of Great Price. I didn't know the Pearl of Great Price from anything, but every week, every night, I'd read to him. I'd question him on this scripture. And he could recall it like you can't believe. I mean, you know. I said, Cassio, you don't believe this. Yeah, I do. And he'd tell me why. The next day, I'd say, Cassio, you don't believe all this nonsense, do you? Yeah. Well, anyway, at the end, I shouted, Cassio! That isn't from your Bible. That's from the Pearl of Great Price. It's a type of Mormon Bible. And you said you believed in it, you know. And I remember Cassio getting out his prayer beads. And he went through his prayer beads into the night because of my treachery. But I stayed at Mrs. Bain's, and I had a great time at Wyoming.
What do you mean? What are you alluding to when you said you had a great time? Because it's obvious you did.
Well, I had a wonderful time. Well, I don't remember studying. Lloyd took me down. My oldest brother, Lloyd. Mother thought that it would be prudent that we'd go down there and that I would be inducted into Wyoming. I think, where were you then? Were you on your mission?
What was the year?
It was in 1951.
No, I was in Brazil.
Hink was in Brazil. So Lloyd took me down to Laramie. And he was going to oversee my getting into school. He took me down there. I never saw him again. I think he shook my hand at the end and said goodbye. He was out seeing all of his pals. And I went to the school at the University of Wyoming and went to all of the parties, all the dances. It was outrageous. And Mother had always asked me why, that she said none of my children, actually, in fact, I think Mary Louise went for a quarter or two to BYU. She said to me, would you go to BYU? And I said, of course, Mother. I loved her so much I'd say sure, knowing full well, of course, I never would. In my second year of college, Pete Simpson was to pick me up that morning, and I went and Mother woke me up upstairs. And I can remember it was a sunny morning. I woke up and it was a little early. And Mother was there and she had tears in her eyes. She held my hand and she said, Charles. I you promised me that you'd go to BYU. And I said, that's right, Mother, and I love you, so I'll go. But probably, and of course, Pete's going to come pick me up this morning, and I don't have a ride down there anyway. And she said, your brother Max downstairs in my car, and you're already loaded up. I pre-packed. So we drove to Provo, Utah. We had no transcript, nothing. Oh, here's the phone.
Okay.
Hello? Hello? Yeah.
Let me make sure this is going. Yeah.
Yeah, of course you've heard.
So you were kind of shanghaied to.
Yeah, well,
Provo.
so we went down to Provo, and I'll never forget it. I stayed at 620 North University, and I was going to stay 1 quarter. But at the end of the quarter, I had an emergency appendectomy, and I had my appendix out, and I couldn't take my final, so I had to go back winter quarter.
Just because you had to.
Yeah, because I had to take my test, and so winter quarter, then came spring quarter, and I thought, well, it's might as well stay spring quarter. And I'm grateful I did, because here's the University of Wyoming. The airport. Paul Sue, why don't you put it on hold? Press the red button, put it on hold, and I'll talk to him.
All right. I guess, let's see. We were talking about Cranbrook, and then you. Okay, no, we were talking about how you ended up staying at BYU.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, and so I went through the spring at BYU, and it was wonderful. I mean, we were starting to talk about Wyoming, 7,200 feet. The airport, 7,400 feet, and the wind blows like you can't believe. In those days, they had steam engines and a lot of cinders in the air. It was awful. You go down Brigham Young, and soft, and the girls were absolutely gorgeous, and they're in their bathing suits out sunbathing. So, but that summer I went back to work again, and in Wyoming. And
On
then
the grade?